Thank you, and such an honor to be here today. Also, first of all, thank you to Anya and Masha for choosing this project to exhibit. I think it's very important, so any kind of chance I get to talk about this project, I'm really grateful for. It really directly has an impact on the case. But first of all, my name is Clara, and I'm going to present to you, or a little bit for the next 10 minutes at least, the project called Uncovering an Iceberg, the Coil Campaign in Greenland and the Forces of Danish Colonialism. So yes, this was the first slide. And we can go further to the next. Yes. So what's important is not, of course, to know who I am, but it's important to know the basis of how I began this project and how I began the research. I was born in Greenland in 1996 by Danish parents, and we moved back to Denmark after 6 years. And then in 2022, I went back to Greenland for the first time, both to interview the Greenlandic women and also to start the investigation and look into the archives. And so it all started here. When I say the Coil Campaign, it has different names. It's also called an IUD, it's called a sterilet. But what it is an intrauterine device that goes into the uterus, and it's a form of prevention or like a birth control. And this one is called Lippi's Loop. It was the first of its kind, developed in the 60s. And as Dr. Jack Lippe says in this report, the making of the first loop, is that it was easier to insert than it was to remove. And so the story behind the Coil Campaign is that it was a campaign that happened in Greenland, and it happened in 1966 until 1976. And there was inserted 4,500 IUDs into Greenlandic girls and women, and it was done as an extension to the school procedure you have. So when you were in school as a kid, going to the doctors, being measured, being weighed. And they were inserted without their informed consent. Yes, so what I'm presenting here now and also what I'm presenting upstairs is, of course, an archive, both to explain the mechanisms that go into the archive, how difficult it is to retrieve that information, but also to show you the chronological journey was to go through one to the other and figure out layers of this information rolling, uncovering the iceberg of this vast campaign. Great. So it started in the Arctic Archive, which is in Copenhagen. And in the Arctic Archive, that was the first time I went to an archive. I expected to find, of course, things that were in relation to the Coil Campaign. Instead, what I found was more looking at Greenland as how they could make it more efficient. So there's meticulous drawings of plumbing to reinterpret into the sanatoriums that they were trying to establish throughout the 17 villages of the East Coast. And then I went to the Danish National Archive, which is just on the other side of the water. And here it all started to take shape. So what I expected to find in the first archive, where there was nothing really about the IUD campaign, here was everything that I could have as a researcher, I could have expected to find, right? So there was, first of all, proof of the IUD campaign happening, when it happened, where it happened, and then there was also all of the doctors involved. There was also documents showing specific doctors, Jørgen Bøgel, Ole Berg, how they were kind of almost, when they were explaining their work in Greenland, bragging about the efficiency of this campaign and how many IUDs there was. For example, in the letter that you see here on the left, he's saying that now, he's reporting back to the Danish state and the Association for Family Planning in Denmark, where he says that 1,350 IUDs have now been inserted, and this is a year after the campaign started. And then I found what was very surprising beyond this, the fact that it was Danish doctors explaining this. It was also international organizations, so not only the Family Planning Organization of Denmark, but also, I think, organizations that we're familiar with. So Planned Parenthood, but then called International Planned Parenthood. There was funding letters from also Ford Foundation, from the Rockefeller Institute, from the Population Council, which is an organization started by Rockefeller. And at the moment when I'm expecting to find solely reports from Danish doctors, Danish state minister people. I'm sitting there and also wondering, what are these international bodies doing here? What are these international organizations doing in what I think is a case only between Denmark and Greenland? So that question is kind of also then moving my trajectory a bit further. And so I also go to a hospital because I want to look at all of the elements that are part of this insertion. Like, what is the space and what's the procedure? And I start talking to a doctor because the thing that I go there for is to find the women's medical journals. And it could seem like a silly place to look for such kind, but like, you need to understand the procedures from a doctor's perspective as well. And so I go there and he says that there is a procedure where if you insert an IUD, you're only obligated to have that in the medical journal for 10 years, then it disappears. So the women at this point of the research phase, they couldn't show proof of the fact that it was inserted because it was nowhere to be found in their medical journals. And so I finally go to Greenland. I forgot to mention that what also catalyzed my research phase was a podcast that came out where the Greenlandic women talked, especially a woman, the whistleblower called Naja Lybert. And they talk about a secret archive in Nuuk, which is the capital. And I was like, how secret can this archive be? You know, and so I go there and it turns out that, I think we can go to the next slide, actually. Yeah, I go there, and turns out, of course, like there are certain things, but because I'm a Danish Greenlandic citizen, I can go there as a research status. So, it's not as complicated and not as secret as it sounded. And so I get access, and in there I find documentations from the same doctor who bragged about the 1,350 IUDs, where he is suggesting that we do this procedure in school because the girls are most malleable at this time. So there is like the direct documentation of when they decided and where they decided to do this and implement this procedure. And then there's also the layer here on the right side, of course, like the amount of NDAs I sometimes have had to sign in order to gain access and all these like very tedious procedures. I think we can go. And then for the interview with Naja, I want you guys to just hear from when I went to talk to her.
Så, men det var i hvert fald uden samtykke fra mine forældre.
Ja.
Og det var ikke vejledning.
Nej. Det
var, jeg ved ikke, hvad jeg skal sige. Det var et krav, eller uden mulighed for at sige ja eller nej.
Right. So that was just part of the quite extensive interview that I did with Naja, but also the first talk that I had of many with her. And then back, because we need to go back to the full scope of the story, back to the archives. The international organizations that I found in the Danish archive kind of always lingered in the back of my mind, like, what is the scope of this story? Why did it happen? Like, is there an answer? Like, why would the Danish government implement a procedure like this or a campaign like this? And so I followed Le Peace Loop. Like, where was it produced? It was produced outside of New York in Buffalo, and I followed the rest of the documentation from the Population Council to the Rockefeller Archive Center in New York. Yeah. And here I find an incredible amount of information. I guess also if you go upstairs, you'll see on the folders the amount that there was. But what's important in this picture is that I get to establish a direct link from the Danish doctor who they're all responding with in Denmark, who then went to New York back then and had the biggest meetings and conferences with Dr. Jack Liepes, Raymond Ewell, and Sheldon Siegel, who were all directors of the Population Council funded by the Rockefeller. And so not only that, but then I also find that he's bragging about these first tests that he did in Greenland prior to the campaign starting in '66. So he's going back saying, like, you should see what I did in Greenland and how efficient it was, like, we can do something with this. And then what I also find is, of course, how throughout the 70s, plenty of countries, in addition to this, start ordering, there's like a template contract for the IUD campaign. And that leads up to the moment when I go back to the Danish archive, as now there's only missing a link between the population, or there is a suggested link between the Population Council and the Danish Dr. Erik Rosen. And so I go back, and after 3 months, I get access to this report, the first initial report Dr. Erik Rosen made from the 3 villages in Greenland. And it says directly so in the bottom that the first 250 IUDs were gifted by the Population Council for this test. And so where the case is at now, I spent a year on this project, and I went back to Denmark in the summer of 2023, so about last year. And since I met Naya, I've been working with her and for her in terms of just providing all the research. And so there was an official government investigation launched in 2022, also when I began my research. And so I gave all the research to them, which steered the investigation to New York in order for them to uncover the full scope of the story. But then I also gave it to the women's lawyers because they're suing the Danish state. And as it also says here, when I started working with them last year, we were talking about 52 women, and now it's 147 women who are now a part of the subpoena of the Danish state under the European Convention of Human Rights. Yeah. Thank you.